local government elections, and when it comes to the Brisbane City Council area, it really seems that public transport is front and centre of the promises that are being made. A little later I'll recap Labor's announcement a couple of weeks ago, but this morning a brand new announcement for you from the Greens mayoral candidate, who's right here, Jonathan Srenganathan. Jonathan, what are you announcing today?
Yeah, morning. Basically, we're proposing a massive transformation in affordability of public transport. We want to set Brisbane on the path to having free public transport. So there's 3 steps to this that we're proposing that Brisbane City Council could undertake. The first is free public transport for kids all the time, weekdays, weekends. The second element is free public transport for everyone on weekends, weeknights, and off-peak. And the third proposal is that we trial universal free public transport for 3 months. So free public transport for kids ongoing, free off-peak transport for everyone ongoing, and then trial universal free public transport for 3 months and say to the state government, let's see how it goes. And if it works well, then the state government can pay for it to be a permanent change.
What problem does this policy attempt to solve?
Basically a lot of problems, right? Brisbane has become a very car-centric city. The city council, actually all levels of government, are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year widening roads, widening intersections to carry more cars. They also spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year maintaining and resurfacing existing roads. And you've got this very inefficient transport network where you're moving larger and larger numbers of people around in these big metal boxes. It's not at all efficient. Public transport is a big part of the answer here. And we've also been proposing a range of changes to improve the frequency of buses, to improve intersuburban connectivity, and we can talk about that later. But one of the main barriers that people keep identifying to using public transport is the cost. For many families, it's often cheaper to drive to a destination and pay for parking than it is to catch a bus or train. So we want to make public transport free, shift more people onto public transport, reduces congestion, reduces climate pollution. It's good for amenity and the environment, and it's good for the city as a whole.
Curious, as you're listening, if that's the barrier that you face and if you think that a policy like this would change your behaviour around public transport, you can send a text if you like on 0467 922 612, or you can call 1300 222 612. If price is the barrier, Jonathan, does that mean that the current pricing system where you have peak and off-peak does encourage people to choose the lower pricing option? Do you see a shift in behaviour with the current policy?
I mean, I know as someone who's been on a low income myself, I'll choose to travel off-peak if I can because it's cheaper. But the part of the idea of making off-peak travel free is that it shifts some of that peak demand into the off-peak. So in the morning peak, some of our buses are very, very busy. If we say to people, look, if you travel just after 9, you can travel for free, that will help smooth out those curves and peaks. And so in the short term, making off-peak transport free has a lot of benefits in terms of easing those peak demand times. The big benefit for me of free off-peak travel is weekend travel, though. There are so many people who are driving to farmers markets, driving to sports events, driving into the city to go to South Bank or whatever. All those people would be able to catch the bus or train or ferry for free under our plan. That would be transformational for the city.
So because of that shift in behaviour that you're talking about and the high traffic times, does that mean making it free for everybody all the time would create problems because you're not shifting that behaviour out of the peak period?
If we do get to a permanent free public transport arrangement, I think there would probably be more demand for public transport and we'd have to put on more services eventually. Right now, most of our services are running below capacity. And that's why we want to do a 3-month trial. We want to trial free public transport for 3 months, see how it goes, see what impacts it has on the network, because there are so many variables it's very difficult to model. You have transport planners saying, oh, if we drop prices by this much, this many more people will use it. If we make prices free, there'll be much more demand on services. We can't know for sure what will happen until we give it a go. So let's try it for 3 months, see what that does to congestion, see what that does to the network as a whole, and adjust accordingly.
Is this a cost of living measure or a kind of philosophy?
It's kind of both, I guess. I mean, obviously, cars are an incredibly unsustainable form of transport and they're not efficient in a growing city. So we need to shift away from car dependency. There are some people who have to drive, and fair enough, but the vast majority of people who are moving around our city, our goal is that they can travel by walk-in, ride-in, or public transport directly to where they need to go. And that's why we've also announced a proposal for 15 new high-frequency bus services that go directly between suburbs. Because right now, a lot of services go into the city. And so if you're getting from one suburb to another, you have to go all the way into the CBD and back out again. We're proposing a whole bunch of new routes that go directly between suburban hubs, so people have a more efficient and direct route on public transport.
So ring routes around the city? Or?
Not just ring routes, but straight lines across the city. So straight lines from, the Gap to Barden, straight lines from Hamilton down to Mount Gravatt over the Gateway Bridge. These are like major changes to the way the network's currently configured.
Thank you so much for your text. Somebody on the text line saying council buses need to have effective air conditioning. That's the barrier. And drivers need to make sure it's turned on. And Ray in Redbank says nothing's free. Somebody else is paying if you're not. So how do you fund this?
Yeah, that's Ray's right, and that's true of roads as well, right? Right now, we're spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, endlessly widening roads. And what the Greens are saying is, let's put some of that money that we spend every year, again and again, to widen more roads. Let's put some of that money towards the bus network and towards making public transport free. We're also proposing a range of other revenue measures in the council election, like increasing developer charges and making developers pay their fair share towards the cost of infrastructure and services. But really, the bulk of the money would come from reducing spending on road widening. That doesn't mean reducing spending on road maintenance, but it means we stop spending $20, $30, $40 million on widening intersections and roads to carry more cars.
So increasing developer charges in a situation where we've had building costs escalate astronomically in the last couple of years, and where we have a crisis where we need more accommodation in the city, isn't that counterproductive?
No, and we can have a longer discussion about this if you want, but basically developers are already charging the maximum amount for new housing that the market can bear. Only about 10% of housing that's up for sale is newly built housing. Most housing that's up for sale is existing housing stock. So developers of new housing have to meet the market. And that means if their costs rise, then land values drop in proportion, because developers who are bidding for developable land will be willing to pay less for land. So increasing infrastructure charges doesn't increase the cost of housing, it just reduces developer profit margins and puts downward pressure on land values.
Couldn't it mean though that developers sit on developable land for longer, to land bank it until it's a more economic proposition?
Yeah, so the Greens are also proposing a vacancy levy. We've got a lot of vacant land, a lot of vacant buildings, old warehouses sitting empty right now under the current system. And so a vacancy levy would discourage property speculators and developers from leaving that land empty. We could get building faster.
14 minutes past 8 on ABC Radio Brisbane and ABC Gold Coast this morning. Thank you so much to the person who's suggested a different policy altogether. Not sure, dear anonymous texter, if you're planning also on running for mayor, but a suggestion for free. They should make it like it was in the old days when you could buy an unlimited weekly ticket for $40.
I loved that. I remember those days. Yeah.
Thank you so much to Andrew in Wakeley, who says, we choose to drive because it's cheaper. Free public transport would allow my family to travel more and do more things around the city. Thank you, Andrew, for that. And another person saying free public transport's a great idea for kids. Definitely cost as a barrier for using public transport, and great for getting kids to school. Although you can apply for bus passes if you're outside of 5K zone.
Yeah, but it's convoluted though, and I mean everyone sees how bad school traffic is, right? That's one of the reasons we're leading with free public transport for kids, and it would only cost about $13.5 million per year to make public transport in Southeast Queensland free for children. That's buses and trains and ferries. That's a fairly small proportion of the council's annual $4 billion budget, but it would have a huge impact on traffic congestion around schools in particular. But it's also about giving children, particularly teenagers, more freedom to move around the city and get to friends' houses and get to other destinations without parents having to be full-time taxi drivers.
16 minutes past 8. This isn't the only transport announcement that we've had so far in this council election campaigns. So you've been hearing so far this morning from the Greens, Jonathan Sriranganathan. You should hear too a little recap of what Labor has promised. This is Labor's mayoral candidate Tracy Price on their policy.
To announce today, Steve, that we're going to halve all bus fares in Brisbane, and we're going to contribute $1 billion in road infrastructure to put a focus on the suburban intersection upgrades and congestion busing projects.
Why cut bus fares by half?
Look, the cost of living for ratepayers all across Brisbane is a massive concern at the moment, and residents are crying out for help from all levels of government, and this is a way that at a local level we can help residents of Brisbane.
How are you going to pay for that big loss of revenue?
Look, we've costed it in our budget. The current council is spending $1 billion over on the metro, 141 million on Victoria Park. The green bridges are over budget. They spend $4 million on, flashy brochures on themselves and millions of dollars on overseas junkets. We're going to redirect all of the money that's spent on big inner city projects back into the suburbs so the residents of Brisbane benefit from it rather than just the inner city project.
That was the Labor mayoral candidate Tracy Price speaking a couple of weeks ago now. And at the time, the response from the LNP, the council chair for Transport, Councillor Ryan Murphy, spoke with ABC's Kelly Higgins-Devine and was sceptical about those policy ideas.
This 50% discount on Zone 1 and Zone 2 fares would be very, very difficult to implement. If it's only going to be for Brisbane users, then they're going to have to figure out a way to separate the people who live in Brisbane and the people who commute from cities outside Brisbane in via the busway, because otherwise they'll be.
I don't think that's what she was saying. Do you think that's what she was saying?
In South East Queensland.
I mean, they were saying Brisbane only, and they were saying buses only, but we've got to respond to that.
Yeah. Brisbane to inside the city limits, and then jump on buses down for the city to take advantage of the 50% discount. The other problem is, what this means is it means that Brisbane City Council will be the only council that subsidises public transport in this way, and it will mean that we will be subsidising everyone in Ipswich, Moreton, Logan, who want to come into Brisbane to use our buses. And this council already contributes just shy of $200 million annually to subsidise public transport in Brisbane. So this would further dig us into the hole of doing the state government's job when it comes to fare relief, and there's no guarantee that
That's their council chair for Transport, Councillor Ryan Murphy, speaking there in response to the Labor transport announcement. And of course, this morning you're hearing the Greens transport announcement, their pitch for local government via the mayoral candidate, Jonathan Sriranganathan. Jonathan, how would you respond to that? As Ryan Murphy says, if he says it can't be justified to halve the fees as Tracy Price has suggested as their policy, then how could you do it for free? Yeah,
so I mean, Labor's rightly recognised that prices are too expensive, but basically they're making the choice that they want to continue spending more money on suburban road widening and only halve public transport fares. Whereas we're saying, let's stop widening roads, let's stop encouraging more and more congestion and just go ahead and make it free. The LNP critique of the Labor policy, I think, is partly correct in that they're only proposing to make buses half price fares and trains would still be full fare. We're proposing that buses and trains and ferries would all be free. I think the critique, though, that people outside Brisbane are going to drive to the border of Brisbane and then switch onto a bus doesn't hold true, because if you're getting on a service further out, you tap on, when you get off in the city, you tap off, and the fare can just be calculated to give you the free travel for the stretch that you're coming through Brisbane itself.
Matthew and Maruka, thank you so much for your correction. Matthew saying it's a Lord Mayor, Kate. Please refer to people as what they are. Lord Mayoral candidates, not mayoral candidates. Terrible that the ABC can't get the title right.
Oh, look, I've been calling myself mayor. So.
I'm sorry. My sincere apologies for that. That was an oversight. I think I do need another coffee. It's true. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for stopping by and talking public transport.
My pleasure. People can check out the details on the website. If you've got more questions, look it up.
Let me get that correct. Lord Mayoral candidate for the Greens, Jonathan Sriranganathan.
Thanks so much.
A couple of more texts coming